Hello everyone, welcome back to another episode of Ocean State Aquatics TV, and today we're going to be having a discussion on the 10 biggest mistakes that people most commonly make when starting up an aquarium for the first time. When setting up a new tank, there is a lot of aspects that you have to learn in a really short period of time to make sure that everything goes smoothly and that your fish don't end up dying on you. So these are the top 10 biggest mistakes that I have personally noticed that people make all the time when setting up their first tank. So hopefully this video will help you not make the same ones. So let's say that you just bought a brand new tank. You bring it home, you get it set up, and you come to the store and put your first fish into it. What do you do now? So the first biggest mistake that I see people make all the time is not adding enough beneficial bacteria into your tank. Beneficial bacteria is very important because it processes through the nitrogen cycle or the cycle of processing through fish waste. So fish produce ammonia, beneficial bacteria will convert this to nitrite and then to nitrate. That is the process of cycling your aquarium. My coworker Taras actually did a fantastic video explaining the nitrogen cycle that if you're watching on YouTube, Danny will link this video. When you buy beneficial bacteria, it will have a recommended dose on the back of the bottle. Sometimes, depending on your water chemistry of your tank at home, that may not be enough to cycle your tank entirely through. It depends on the chemistry of your tank, it depends on how many fish you add in, depends on the size of your tank, and the amount of filtration that you have. So the biggest mistake that I notice people all the time is they'll add bacteria once and think that'll be enough. So sometimes that just won't do it and you have to add a little bit more. So that brings me to my second point of another one of the most common beginner mistakes is improper testing. When you're setting up a new tank, you have to test your aquarium all the time. We recommend testing at least twice to 3 times a week so you make sure you know exactly where your levels are, and if your ammonia or your nitrite gets too high, then you either know you can add more beneficial bacteria, or if your tank cycles all the way through and your nitrates are really high, you know when to do your first water change. So when you are trying to cycle your tank, this actually brings me to our third most common beginner mistakes is underfiltration. There is actually 2 things that can go wrong by underfiltering your tank. The first issue ties into our first and second most common mistakes is lack of biomedia space. So in order to properly cycle your tank, you do have to have adequate space for the beneficial bacteria to grow on. If you have a filter that is a little bit too small for your tank, sometimes that doesn't have enough space for the beneficial bacteria to grow on. So underfiltering your tank sometimes will not allow your tank to cycle all the way through. The second problem with underfiltration is actually lack of flow. The less flow that your tank has, the less dissolved oxygen your tank will have, and sometimes your fish can actually suffocate from that. So our fourth common mistake that beginners usually make is the actual complete opposite of our third point, which is overfiltration. The problem with overfiltration is actually just a miscommunication. A lot of people will come in saying, oh, I've got really big, really nice, really strong filtration on my tank, so I have no ammonia, I've got no nitrites and no nitrates. So that's actually a huge myth. The bigger the filter you have in the tank, the bigger the biomedia space you have and the bigger the filter capacity that you have. Your filter will not actually filter out ammonia, nitrite, and nitrate. That stuff is dissolved in the water and you can't actually see it, and your filter will not filter it out. The only way to get rid of that is by water changes and by adding more beneficial bacteria. Another way that you can naturally remove nitrates is actually by live plants. Live plants will absorb nitrates. Really cool fun fact. There is actually no downside to overfiltering your tank, so when in doubt, always size up your filter, but just know it will not filter out your ammonia, your nitrites, or your nitrates. Moving on to our 5th biggest beginner mistake is overstocking your tank too quickly. A lot of people will come in and say, oh, I just set up a brand new tank and I'm ready to put all of the fish in it. You do not want to do that. You want to start very slowly and add fish over a long period of time. When you are first starting out your aquarium, you want to pick a small group of very hardy fish that can withstand some ammonia and some nitrite in the aquarium, so you don't want to pick fish that are going to be too sensitive, so they can withstand the first beginning of your nitrogen cycle going through your tank. If you stock your tank entirely to capacity right at the beginning, it's going to shoot your ammonia levels way through the roof, and you're going to have to add lots of beneficial bacteria in, and sometimes it can give you a lot of issues when cycling, and sometimes you may even lose some fish. So it's really important that you just start with a small group of fish. Definitely don't stock your tank all the way to capacity, and that will give you better luck cycling your tank. Moving on to our 6th biggest beginner mistake, and this is another one relating to stocking your tank, is getting a sucker fish. I have a lot of people that come in and ask for a sucker fish, or commonly known as a pleco. A lot of people don't know that not all plecos eat algae, so if you're looking for an algae eater, a pleco is not always the way to go. My coworker Ali actually did a phenomenal video talking about Plecos, which if you're watching on YouTube, Danny can link below. So if you have a relatively smaller tank, or if you are looking for some sort of algae eater, don't always go with the first Pleco that you see, because 90% of them don't actually eat algae. Besides the lack of eating algae, most Plecos actually get very large. So if you have a smaller tank, or if you don't want to deal with the higher waste load, getting a Pleco is not always the best idea for your tank. Moving on to the 7th biggest beginner mistakes that I notice people making is lack of water changes. When you first set up a tank, and especially during the first few months when it's just getting established, water changes are very important to establishing a proper ecosystem. Keeping up with your water changes also ties in with proper testing and not overstocking your tank or stocking it too quickly, because the more fish that you have in your tank, the more water changes you have to do. The more you test your tank, the more you can see where you're at level-wise, and you can know when you are due for your next water change. Keeping up on your water changes are a great way to make sure that your fish stay happy, your fish stay healthy, they keep growing, and that your tank will become properly established over time. Moving on to my 8th biggest beginner mistake is lack of decorations. Having lots of decorations in your tank are really important for a few reasons. The first reason is so your fish have places to hide. Some fish sometimes don't get along with each other, so they might chase each other around the tank. If you have decorations in your tank, they can actually go hide in them, hide behind them, gives them a place to get away from the other fish in the tank. The second reason is they actually help break up sight lines. That also helps mitigate aggression, because if the fish can't see each other from opposite sides of the tank, they will less likely to be aggressive towards each other. The third reason why having a lot of decorations is important is the fish like to sleep in them. Especially betta fish really like a place that they can go and rest. Now moving on to the 9th biggest beginner mistake, and this is one that I see way too often, is people leaving their aquarium lights on for way too long. The longer that you have your aquarium lights on, the more algae will grow in your tank. Tying into lighting, another really big mistake is blue light. If you have a fish tank that's in your child's room and you turn the fish tank light off and you turn that blue light or that moonlight on, you leave it on all night long, blue light, all it does is grow algae. I would like to clarify that the blue light growing algae is only in a freshwater scenario. If you don't have live plants in your tank, you only really need to turn your light on when you are enjoying the aquarium. You have a few different lighting schedules that you can adapt. You can turn it on in the morning, turn it off when you leave for work or leave for school, and then turn it back on in the evening, or you can leave it off the whole day and just turn it on in the evening when you are actually enjoying looking at your tank. If you have live plants in your tank, then it is a little bit of a different story, because the plants need to photosynthesize. But if you're not running carbon dioxide on your tank, then your plants don't actually photosynthesize for more than about 3 hours at a time, so you don't actually need to have your light on all day long. Just to reiterate, the longer you have your light on, the more algae will grow in your tank, and the more you will have to wipe down the sides and the more water changes you will have to do. And last but not least, the biggest mistake that I notice people make all the time when first getting started out is putting the wrong types of fish in one tank together. When you are starting out a tank and you have no idea what you're doing, before you buy any fish, I cannot stress enough, do your research. You want to make sure the fish that you buy are compatible both in behavior-wise and diet-wise. There are a lot of different fish in the hobby that cannot exist in the same tank together due to different dietary restrictions. They eat different foods, as well as some are just a lot meaner than the others and can sometimes be really aggressive and even kill other fish. Having a fish tank is just like having any other pet. Do your research, make sure the fish is compatible for you before buying them and bringing them home. Thank you guys for watching, and this has been the top 10 biggest beginner mistakes that I've noticed that people make. Hopefully this helps you not make some of the same mistakes that I've seen other people make, and keep it fresh.